The champagne glass slipped from Caroline's fingers the moment she saw the woman in red walk through her baby shower. A stranger, uninvited, smiling like she owned the room. "I'm Vanessa," she said. "I work with your husband. He talks about you all the time." But it was the next words that stopped Caroline's heart. "Derek picked out that blue blanket himself. I was with him when he chose it. 7 months pregnant, surrounded by friends and family. And suddenly Caroline realized she was the only one who didn't know. Her husband had been paying for this woman's apartment for 8 months. 8 months of lies. 8 months of secret meetings, starting just 2 weeks after Caroline announced her pregnancy. Escalation, next 20 seconds. But here's what Vanessa didn't expect. She didn't expect Caroline's father-in-law, a retired judge with 40 years on the bench, to start investigating. She didn't expect him to uncover her pattern. 2 previous marriages, 2 wealthy husbands, 2 massive divorce settlements. Derek was target number 3. And she definitely didn't expect what happened at the Mitchell family charity gala. In front of 300 guests, when the one person she never wanted to see again walked onto that stage, her own mother. Final hook. Last 10 seconds. What happens when a predator becomes the prey? When the woman who thought she had won everything loses it all in a single night. Stay until the end, because the satisfying, 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 satisfying moment of satisfying true justice, satisfying is satisfying coming, and it's worth every satisfying second. Lesson and value. This story carries a powerful message for every woman who has ever felt invisible in her own marriage. Sometimes the people meant to protect us become the ones who hurt us most. But here's the truth that Caroline discovered, and that I hope stays with you long after this story ends. You are not crazy for trusting your instincts. You're not weak for staying longer than you should have. And you are never, ever too broken to rebuild. The real victory isn't revenge. It's becoming the woman who no longer needs anyone else to feel whole. The champagne flute slipped from Caroline's fingers the moment she saw the woman in red walk through her front door. Glass shattered against the marble floor. Champagne splashed across her ankles. The room went silent for exactly 3 heartbeats before the chatter resumed. "Oh my goodness, let me get that," her mother-in-law Patricia said, already snapping her fingers at the catering staff. But Caroline did not move. She could not move. Her eyes stayed locked on the woman standing in her foyer. Red wrap dress, dark hair cascading over bare shoulders. A gift bag dangling from perfectly manicured fingers. The woman smiled. It was the kind of smile that said she knew something everyone else did not. "Caroline, sweetheart, you have a guest," Patricia called out, her voice bright and welcoming. Caroline forced her feet forward, 7 months pregnant and suddenly feeling every ounce of that weight pressing down on her spine. "Hi there," the woman said. "I'm Vanessa Cole. I work with Derek." "Derek never mentioned you," Caroline replied. Something flickered in Vanessa's eyes. Amusement, maybe? Or satisfaction? "Well, we've been working very closely together on the Henderson account. He talks about you all the time, of course. The baby, the nursery. I just had to stop by and congratulate you both." Caroline's hand moved to her belly. She pressed her palm against the curve without thinking. Then again, and once more, 3 times, a protective gesture she did not even realize she was making. "That's very thoughtful," Caroline managed. "Isn't it?" Vanessa stepped past her, heels clicking against the marble. "What a beautiful home. Derek said you decorated it yourself." Caroline watched her move through the living room like she was cataloging every detail. The wedding photo on the mantel, the ultrasound picture framed in silver, the stack of baby books on the coffee table. Megan appeared at Caroline's elbow, her best friend since college, her maid of honor, her emergency contact. "Who is that?" Megan whispered. "She says she works with Derek." She's looking at your husband's high school photo like she memorized every inch of his face. Caroline's stomach turned. Morning sickness had ended months ago, but the nausea rolling through her now had nothing to do with pregnancy. The baby shower continued around her. 30 women eating finger sandwiches and playing games involving diapers and chocolate bars. Patricia had insisted on planning the whole thing. Caroline had agreed because it seemed like an olive branch after 6 years of cold politeness from her mother-in-law. Now Patricia was introducing Vanessa to everyone like she was a special guest instead of an uninvited stranger. "She's so charming," Patricia said, loud enough for half the room to hear. "Derek is lucky to have such a dedicated colleague," Vanessa laughed. The sound was musical, practiced. Caroline watched her examine the display of baby gifts, tiny onesies and soft blankets, a handcrafted mobile with felt animals, the blue cashmere blanket that had cost more than Caroline's first car. Vanessa picked it up, ran her fingers over the fabric. "This is exquisite," she said. "Derek has wonderful taste." Caroline went cold. "Derek picked that out?" "Of course. We were shopping for a client gift, and he saw it in the window. He said it was exactly the shade of blue he wanted for the nursery." Vanessa's smile widened. "I was with him when he chose it." The room tilted slightly. Caroline grabbed the back of a chair. "Are you all right?" someone asked. "Fine. Just need some air." She made it to the bathroom before her knees gave out. The lock clicked behind her and she sank onto the closed toilet lid. Her hands were shaking. This bathroom, this exact spot. She had sat here 11 months ago with a positive pregnancy test trembling between her fingers. Derek had been waiting outside the door. When she opened it, when she showed him those 2 pink lines, he had lifted her off her feet and spun her around until they were both dizzy with joy. Now she was sitting in the same place, processing an entirely different kind of test. She pulled out her phone. Derek was supposed to be golfing with clients, a Saturday afternoon thing he did twice a month. She had never questioned it. The location app loaded slowly. She watched the little circle spin. There it was, Derek's dot, blinking steadily. Not at the golf course. The address made her stomach lurch. She did not recognize the street name, but she knew what it meant. A residential neighborhood, an apartment complex. She typed the address into a search engine. The results came back instantly. Luxury apartments, 1-bedroom units starting at $3,500 a month. Caroline stared at her phone until the screen went dark. The bathroom door handle jiggled. She jumped. "Caroline?" Patricia's voice came through the wood. "Vanessa's asking for you. She wants to give you her gift personally." Caroline looked at her reflection in the mirror. Pale face, shadowed eyes, the glow everyone kept complimenting had vanished in the last 5 minutes. She stood up, smoothed her dress over her belly, unlocked the door. Patricia was waiting with an expectant smile. "There you are. Are you feeling all right? You look a bit peaked." "I'm fine." "Good. Come along then. Vanessa has the most thoughtful gift." The living room felt too bright, too loud, too full of women who had no idea that Caroline's world was crumbling beneath the surface. Vanessa stood by the gift table, holding a pale pink box. "I hope you don't mind," she said. "I wanted to give this to you myself." Caroline took the box. Her fingers felt numb. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a silk robe, cream-colored, impossibly soft, the kind of thing a woman would wear for her husband, or for someone else's husband. "I know how hard the last few months of pregnancy can be," Vanessa said. Her voice dripped with false sympathy. Derek mentioned you've been so tired lately, thought this might help you feel beautiful again. Again, the word hung in the air like smoke. Patricia clasped her hands together. How thoughtful. Vanessa, you must stay for cake. I would love that. Caroline watched Vanessa settle onto the sofa like she belonged there, like she had always belonged there, laughing with Patricia, charming the other guests, asking questions about the baby that felt more like interrogation than interest. Megan pulled Caroline aside. Something is very wrong, Megan said. I can see it in your face. Not here. Caroline, not here. The party stretched on for another 2 hours. Caroline moved through it like a ghost, smiling when she was supposed to smile, opening gifts she would not remember later, thanking people for coming while her mind replayed Vanessa's words on an endless loop. Derek mentioned, "You've been so tired lately." I was with him when he chose it. We've been working very closely together. Finally, the last guest left. The caterers packed up their equipment. Patricia kissed Caroline's cheek and said something about the nursery being almost ready. Then it was just Caroline and the silence and the wreckage of pink streamers and half-eaten cake. She sat down in the middle of it all. Her hand found her belly again. The baby kicked. A strong, insistent movement, like a tiny fist demanding attention. I know, Caroline whispered. I know. Her phone buzzed, a text from Derek. Heading home now, how was the shower? She read it 3 times. Tried to imagine him typing those words from the golf course. Tried to imagine an innocent explanation for everything that had happened today. But she could not, because deep down, in the place where instinct lived, she already knew. She just was not ready to admit it yet. Derek came home at 4:30 that afternoon. Caroline heard his car in the driveway, heard his key in the lock, heard him call out her name like nothing was wrong. In here, she said. He found her in the living room, still surrounded by baby shower debris. She had not moved, could not move. The paralysis of impending truth had frozen her in place. Wow, looks like quite a party. Derek loosened his tie. Sorry, I missed it. The game ran long. Game? Golf. With the Henderson clients? He leaned down to kiss her forehead. She did not react. You okay? You look tired. There was that word again. Tired. Vanessa Cole came to the shower, Caroline said. Something shifted in Derek's posture, a tiny stiffening of his shoulders, that anyone else might have missed. Vanessa? That's nice of her. Is it? She's very friendly, good with clients. She said you two have been working closely together. We're on the same account. That's how work functions. Derek moved toward the kitchen. I'm starving. Did you save any of those little sandwiches? Caroline stood up. The movement was slow, deliberate. Derek. He stopped with his hand on the refrigerator door. Where were you today? I told you. Golfing. Your location says you were at an apartment complex on Meridian Street. The silence that followed was deafening. Derek turned around. His face had gone carefully blank. The face of a man calculating his options. You're tracking my location? It's a family safety app. We set it up when we started trying to get pregnant. You never seemed to mind before. I dropped off some files for Vanessa. Her laptop crashed, and she needed physical copies of the Henderson presentation. On a Saturday. Clients don't care about weekends. During my baby shower. It took 15 minutes, Caroline. She was at my baby shower. For 2 hours. Derek's jaw tightened. What exactly are you accusing me of? I'm asking you a question. No, you're not. You're interrogating me based on the paranoid ramblings of your pregnancy hormones. Caroline felt like she had been slapped. Pregnancy hormones, she repeated. You've been emotional, sensitive. Everyone knows it. Megan even mentioned it to me last week. Megan did not say that. Look. Derek crossed the room and took her hands. His palms were warm, familiar, hands that had held hers at their wedding, hands that had touched her belly when the baby first kicked. I love you. I love our daughter. Whatever you're imagining, it's not real. Carolyn wanted to believe him. Every part of her that had spent 7 years building a life with this man wanted to accept his words and move on, but she could not ignore the way Vanessa had looked at their wedding photo, like she was imagining herself in it. I need you to be honest with me, Caroline said. I am being honest. Then why did Vanessa know the exact shade of blue in our nursery? Derek pulled his hands away. Because she helped me pick it, as a colleague. There's nothing wrong with asking a female coworker for design advice. You told me you spent weeks choosing that color. I did. Vanessa was just one opinion among many. The explanations came too smoothly, too quickly, like he had practiced them. I want to believe you, Caroline said. Then believe me. Derek reached for her again. I married you. I chose you. We're having a baby together. That's what matters. He held her for a long moment. His chin rested on top of her head. His arms wrapped around her swollen belly. She let herself sink into it, let herself pretend, just for a moment, that everything was fine. That night, Derek slept in their bed while Caroline lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I'm not crazy. I know what I saw. The thought came unbidden, sharp and clear. Vanessa's smile when she handed over that robe. The intimacy of the gift. The way she said Derek mentioned, "You've been so tired," like she had heard it in person. Recently, repeatedly. At 2 in the morning, Caroline finally slept. At 6, she woke to find Derek already gone. A note on his pillow. Early meeting. Didn't want to wake you. Love you. She held the note for a long time, read those 2 words over and over. Love you. Did he? Had he ever? The questions followed her through the morning, through her shower, through the toast she could not eat, and the coffee she was not supposed to drink. At 10 o'clock, she went looking for the car registration. They needed to renew it before the end of the month. Derek handled the paperwork, but the envelope should be in his desk. The desk drawer was locked. It had never been locked before. Caroline found the spare key in the kitchen junk drawer. Her hands were steady as she turned it in the lock. The drawer slid open. The registration was there, right on top. But underneath it was a credit card statement. One she had never seen before. A card in Derek's name. A card she did not know existed. She pulled it out. Scanned the charges. The first one made her breath catch. Meridian Street Apartments. $3,500. Dated 8 months ago. There were more. Every month since then. The same amount. The same address. 8 months of payments. 8 months of lies. Caroline sank into the desk chair. The statement trembled in her hands. 8 months ago. That was 2 weeks after she announced her pregnancy. Vanessa had moved into that apartment 2 weeks after Derek learned he was going to be a father. The baby kicked again. Harder this time. Caroline pressed her hand against the movement. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry you have to feel this too. She did not know if she was apologizing to her daughter or to herself. Maybe both. The tears came then, silent and unstoppable. They soaked into the credit card statement until the ink began to blur. She cried until there was nothing left, until she was hollow and empty and strangely calm. Then she picked up her phone and called Megan. I found the proof, Caroline said. I'm on my way. Megan arrived within an hour. She brought coffee, tissues, and the grim determination of a woman who had spent 10 years as a divorce attorney. Show me everything, she said. Caroline handed over the credit card statement, watched Megan's eyes, scanned the charges. 8 months, Megan said. He started paying for her apartment 2 weeks after I told him about the baby. That tracks. Men like Derek panic when reality sets in. Becoming a father makes it real. So they run towards something that feels like freedom. Is that supposed to make me feel better? No, it's supposed to make you angry. Caroline was not angry yet. She was still stuck somewhere between disbelief and devastation. The anger would come later. Megan started making a list: bank accounts to audit, assets to document, evidence to preserve. You need to decide what you want, Megan said. I can't tell you whether to stay or go, but I can make sure you're protected either way. I don't know what I want. That's okay. You don't have to decide today. Caroline nodded, but she could not focus on legal strategy. Her mind kept drifting backward. Do you remember our wedding? She asked. Megan looked up from her notes. Of course. He cried during the vows. Actual tears. Everyone said they'd never seen Derek so emotional. I remember. Was any of it real? Megan set down her pen. Honey, I need to know. Was I always this blind? Or did he change somewhere along the way? Some people are very good at compartmentalizing. They can feel love and still betray it. Caroline closed her eyes. The memories came flooding in. Unstoppable now. Their first date. A small Italian restaurant with candles on every table. Derek had asked the waiter to bring her peonies because she mentioned once, just once, that they were her favorite flower. What are you thinking about? Megan asked. He remembered the peonies. What? On our first date, I mentioned loving peonies in a conversation about my mother's garden. He brought them to me before the appetizers arrived. I thought it was the most romantic thing anyone had ever done. It probably was at the time. But was it real? Or was it just performance? Megan did not answer. Some questions had no good response. Caroline kept going. The memories poured out like water through a broken dam. The proposal, a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city, string lights twinkling overhead, Derek's voice shaking as he asked her to be his wife. His parents were hiding behind the bar, Caroline said. They came out with champagne as soon as I said yes. Harold squeezed my hand and said, "Welcome to the family, truly." I thought I had finally found where I belonged. Harold is a good man. Patricia wasn't thrilled. She tried to hide it, but I could tell. I was never going to be good enough for her perfect son. Patricia is a snob, but Harold made me feel accepted. Every holiday, every family dinner, he made sure I knew I mattered. Caroline opened her eyes, stared at the ceiling. The pregnancy announcement was the happiest night of my life. Megan waited. We told them over dinner. I handed Patricia a little box with a onesie that said Grandma's first. She cried. Actually cried. First time she ever seemed to genuinely like me. I remember you calling me that night. Derek's hand was on my back the whole time, supporting me, protecting me. That's what I thought anyway. Her voice cracked. Now I know what he was really thinking. About her, about how he was going to tell her, about whether she'd wait or walk away. You don't know that for sure. He started paying for her apartment 2 weeks later, Megan. 2 weeks, while I was still dealing with morning sickness and prenatal vitamins and pure unfiltered joy. The tears came again, quieter this time. Every memory is poison now, Carolyn whispered. Every smile, every I love you. I don't know what was true and what was performance. Megan moved closer, wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Some of it was true, Megan said. Terrible people can still feel real things. They just feel them selfishly. That doesn't help. I know. They sat together in silence. The afternoon light shifted through the windows. At 2 a.m, long after Megan had gone, Caroline found herself doing something strange. She was reorganizing the baby dresser, taking out each tiny outfit, refolding it precisely, putting it back, over and over. The same onesies, the same motions. Her hands needed something to do, something methodical and mindless, something that did not require thinking about Derek or Vanessa or the ruins of her marriage. Fold, smooth, stack, repeat. The baby kicked sleepily, a gentle flutter this time. I know, sweetheart, we should be sleeping. But sleep felt impossible. The apartment was full of landmines now. The couch, where they used to watch movies together, the kitchen where he cooked her favorite meals, the bed where he had held her and lied and held her again. So she kept folding, kept smoothing, kept pretending that organizing baby clothes could somehow organize the chaos inside her. At dawn, she drove to the lake. Her father used to bring her here when she was small. They would fish for hours without catching anything, and he would tell her stories about his own childhood, about growing up poor, about working his way through school, about meeting her mother and knowing instantly that she was the one. "How did you know?" Caroline had asked once. She was maybe 8 years old. "I just did," her father said. "Some things you feel in your bones." He had been dead for 3 years now, her mother for 5. The house she grew up in was empty, but still hers. Caroline sat in her car at the edge of the lake, watched the water catch the early light. She did not cry. She did not scream. She just watched. The baby kicked. "Your grandpa would have loved you," Caroline said. "He would have taught you to fish, badly, but you would have loved every second." A fisherman appeared on the far bank. He cast his line with practiced ease. Caroline watched him for an hour, maybe 2. Time had stopped meaning anything. Finally, she started the car and drove home. Derek's car was in the driveway. He was waiting in the kitchen with coffee and apologies. "Where were you?" he asked. "I woke up and you were gone." "The lake? At 6 in the morning?" "I needed to think." Derek's face softened into something that almost looked like genuine concern. "I know you're going through a lot," he said. "The pregnancy, the hormones, the stress of becoming a mother. I wish I could make it easier." "Do you?" "Of course. I hate seeing you struggle." Caroline studied him, the face she had loved for 7 years, the eyes she had trusted completely. "I found the credit card," she said. Derek went very still. "I know about the apartment," she continued. "I know how long it's been. I know everything." The silence stretched between them, long and terrible. "Caroline," Derek finally said, "don't. Let me explain. There's no explanation that makes this okay. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake, but it didn't mean anything. 8 months, that's not a mistake. That's a decision. Over and over again." Derek ran his hands through his hair. The gesture was so familiar, so achingly ordinary. "I was scared," he said. "Becoming a father. It felt so overwhelming. I panicked." "You panicked into a year-long affair?" "It's not—" He stopped, recalculated. "I love you. I love our daughter. Whatever happened with Vanessa, it's over." "Is it?" "It will be. I'll end it today, right now, whatever you need." Caroline shook her head. "You don't get it," she said. "It's not about whether you end it. It's about whether I can ever trust you again." "You can. I promise. Your promises don't mean anything anymore, Derek." She turned and walked toward the bedroom, started pulling clothes from her closet. "What are you doing?" Derek followed her. "Where are you going?" "My parents' house." "Caroline, please, let's talk about this." "I've talked enough." She packed a bag, threw in whatever her hands touched first. It did not matter. Nothing mattered except getting out. Derek stood in the doorway, helpless and panicking. "This is crazy," he said. "You're 7 months pregnant. You can't just leave." "Watch me." She pushed past him, grabbed her keys, made it to the car before he caught up. "I'll do anything," Derek said. "Therapy, counseling, whatever you want. Just don't go." Caroline looked at him through the car window, the man she married, the father of her child, the stranger who had been lying to her for 8 months. "I'm not going forever," she said. "I'm going until I can figure out what comes next." She drove away before he could respond. In the rearview mirror, she watched him shrink, smaller and smaller, until he disappeared completely. Just like her trust, just like her marriage, just like everything she thought she knew. 1 week passed. 7 days of silence and space and slowly simmering grief. Caroline stayed at her parents' house. The emptiness was painful, but it was a familiar pain, better than the sharp betrayal waiting at her own address. Megan came by every evening. They talked through options, made plans, cried together on the couch where Caroline's father used to watch baseball games. Derek called constantly, left voicemails filled with apologies and promises. She deleted them without listening. Then Patricia called. "We're having a family dinner on Saturday," her mother-in-law announced. "To celebrate the baby's upcoming arrival," Harold insisted. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Nonsense. Whatever's happening between you and Derek, family is family. We need to present a united front. Patricia, Harold specifically asked for you. He says it's important." Harold, the only member of Derek's family who had ever made Caroline feel genuinely welcome. Against her better judgment, she agreed. Saturday arrived too quickly. Caroline dressed carefully. Navy blue dress, comfortable shoes, her mother's pearl earrings that she saved for special occasions. The Mitchell house was lit up like a stage set when she arrived, soft music drifting through the windows, the smell of Patricia's famous pot roast wafting out the door. She almost turned around, almost drove back to her parents' empty house and its comfortable solitude. But Harold was waiting on the porch. Caroline. He came down the steps to meet her, took both her hands in his. "Thank you for coming." "I'm not sure I should be here. I know, but I have my reasons." Something in his voice made her pause. Harold had been a judge for 40 years. He knew how to deliver information, when to hold back, when to reveal. "What reasons?" she asked. "Later," he said. "For now, just trust me." They walked inside together. The dining room was full. Patricia at the head of the table, radiant in her hostess role. Derek, looking uncomfortable, in a suit that seemed too tight. Garrett, Derek's older brother, nursing a glass of wine in the corner. And 3 other people Caroline did not recognize. "These are some colleagues from the firm," Derek said, his voice strained. "I thought it would be nice to include them." Caroline's blood went cold, because one of those colleagues was wearing a red wrap dress. Vanessa Cole smiled. "Caroline, so good to see you again." The audacity was breathtaking, to show up here, to her family dinner, to walk into this house like she had every right to be there. "What is she doing here?" Caroline asked Derek. "I told you. She's a colleague. She's your mistress." The word dropped like a bomb. Silence exploded across the room. "Caroline," Patricia said sharply, "this is neither the time nor the place." "Then when is the time? When is the place?" Because apparently, Derek thinks his affair is appropriate dinner conversation. "There is no affair," Derek said through gritted teeth. "I found the credit card statements. 8 months of apartment payments." More silence. The other colleagues shifted uncomfortably. Garrett set down his wineglass. Vanessa, however, looked completely unbothered. There seems to be some misunderstanding, she said sweetly. Derek helped me find an apartment when I relocated for work. The company reimbursed him. It was completely professional. Reimbursed? Caroline turned to Derek. Is that true? Of course it's true. But he would not meet her eyes. I have the statements, Caroline said. There's no reimbursement. It takes time to process. 8 months of time? Patricia stood up. That's enough. We are going to sit down, eat dinner, and behave like civilized people. Whatever personal matters need to be addressed can wait until after dessert. Caroline wanted to scream, wanted to flip the table and storm out and burn this whole facade to the ground. But she caught Harold's eye across the room. He gave her the smallest nod. Trust me. She sat down. Dinner was a masterpiece of excruciating awkwardness. The pot roast tasted like cardboard. The wine could have been vinegar. Every clink of silverware sounded like gunfire. Vanessa, meanwhile, performed beautifully. She complimented Patricia's cooking with excessive enthusiasm, asked interested questions about the family business, laughed at Derek's weak attempts at humor, and through it all, she found ways to touch him, a hand on his arm, a brush against his shoulder. Small, intimate gestures that said mine more clearly than any words. Caroline watched herself cut her steak, knife through flesh, precise, controlled. She imagined doing something else with that knife. The thought scared her. She set it down. At one point, Vanessa offered to help decorate the nursery. I have such wonderful taste in children's spaces, she said. Don't I, Derek? Derek choked on his wine. Patricia missed the implication completely. Harold did not. His eyes sharpened, focused on Vanessa with the same analytical gaze he had probably used from the bench for 40 years. He sees it, Caroline thought. Thank God. Someone else sees it. After dinner, Vanessa cornered Caroline in the kitchen. You look tired, Vanessa said. Pregnancy must be hard when you're doing it alone. Emotionally speaking. Excuse me? Derek tells me everything. How disconnected you've been, how you've pushed him away. I'm just trying to understand the full picture. Caroline's hands curled into fists. Stay away from my husband. I don't think he's entirely yours anymore. Vanessa's smile widened. But don't worry, I'm not trying to take anything that isn't already being offered. She walked out of the kitchen before Caroline could respond. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. More forced conversation. More pretending everything was fine while the foundation crumbled beneath them. At one point, Caroline stood up too quickly and knocked over her water glass. It spilled across the white tablecloth like a spreading stain. Are you all right? Patricia asked. You've gone pale. She's been so stressed lately, Vanessa announced to the table. Derek says the pregnancy has been really difficult for her mental state. Every word was a calculated blow, every syllable designed to wound. I need air, Caroline said. She made it to the porch before the first sob escaped. The swing creaked beneath her weight, back and forth, back and forth. The same swing where she and Harold had sat for hours after her father's funeral, talking about law and justice and what makes a good life. The chain groaned. Creak, creak. Caroline let the rhythm soothe her shattered nerves. The door opened behind her. She expected Derek, expected another round of denials and justifications, but it was Harold who sat down beside her. I owe you an apology, he said. For what? For not seeing this sooner, for not protecting you from it. You didn't know? I suspected. I should have acted on those suspicions instead of hoping they were wrong. They sat in silence for a moment. The night air was cool against Caroline's tear-stained cheeks. She's not who she says she is, Harold said quietly. That woman in there. She's playing a game none of us fully understood. What do you mean? I mean, I've spent 40 years reading people from the bench. I know predators when I see them. Caroline turned to look at him. His face was grave, determined. I'm going to find out the truth, he said. All of it. And when I do, we're going to make sure she can never hurt anyone else. How? Trust me, he said again. Just a little longer. I promise it will be worth it. Caroline wanted to believe him, needed to believe in something. Okay, she whispered. I trust you. Harold squeezed her hand, the same way he had at her wedding. Welcome to the family, truly. Caroline moved back to her parents' house after the dinner. The distance felt necessary, essential. The baby kicked constantly now, strong movements that kept her awake through the long, empty nights. Each flutter felt like a reminder of what was at stake. One morning, she found herself lying on her childhood bed, staring up at the ceiling. The glow-in-the-dark stars were still there, little plastic constellations yet she had stuck up when she was 8 years old. Her father had lifted her onto his shoulders so she could reach. 24 years later, those stars remained. Faded, but still present. They've outlasted my marriage, she thought. The realization hit harder than expected. This room, these stars, this house where she had learned to walk and talk and dream about her future. All of it would still be standing long after her current life collapsed. She pressed her palm against the curve of her belly. I'm sorry, she whispered to her daughter. I wanted better for you than this. The baby kicked in response, strong and insistent. Megan came by that afternoon with divorce papers. I'm not saying you have to sign them, Megan said, but I want you to have them ready, just in case. The papers sat on the kitchen counter, heavy, final. Caroline could not bring herself to look at them. What if I'm making a mistake, she asked. What if I'm overreacting? You found 8 months of receipts for another woman's apartment. You're not overreacting. But what if he really did end it? What if he's telling the truth about wanting to change? Megan sat down across from her. Let me ask you something, Megan said. Do you believe him? In your gut? In your bones? Do you actually believe he's going to change? Caroline opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. The silence was answer enough. I don't know who I am anymore, Caroline finally admitted. I built my whole life around him, my identity, my future, everything. Somewhere along the way, I became a supporting character in my own life. The words came out before she could stop them. Validation whispered into existence. Megan reached across the table, took her hand. Then maybe it's time to find out who you are without him. That night, Derek showed up, unannounced. Caroline heard his car in the driveway, heard his footsteps on the porch, heard his knock on the door she had once entered as a child. She considered not answering, but the knocking continued, louder, more insistent. When she opened the door, Derek was crying. Please, he said, please let me explain. Against every instinct, screaming at her to walk away, she stepped aside. He came in, looking smaller than she remembered, diminished somehow. The confident man who had swept her off her feet was gone. In his place stood someone desperate and afraid. I made a mistake, Derek said. A terrible, unforgivable mistake. But she meant nothing. I swear she meant nothing. For 8 months, Derek. 8 months she meant nothing? I was scared. Becoming a father felt so overwhelming. I panicked. You keep saying that, like fear justifies betrayal. It doesn't. I know it doesn't. But I need you to understand what was going through my head. What was going through your head while I was dealing with morning sickness? While I was picking out baby names and imagining our future together? Derek's face crumpled. I don't have an excuse. I just have the truth. I was weak. I was selfish. I was stupid. You were unfaithful. Yes. The word hung between them, finally admitted. I love you, Derek continued. That's real. Whatever happened with Vanessa, my love for you is real. How can you say that? How can you claim to love me while paying for another woman's apartment? While spending your Saturdays in her bed instead of at my side? Because both things are true at the same time. I know that doesn't make sense. I know it sounds impossible, but I love you, and I betrayed you, and I hate myself for it. Caroline felt the anger building. The rage that had been simmering beneath her grief finally pushed to the surface. Maybe if you hadn't been so focused on the pregnancy, Derek said. She froze. What did you say? I just mean, we barely talk anymore. You're always tired, always sick. What was I supposed to do? The anger exploded. What were you supposed to do? You were supposed to be my husband. You were supposed to support me through the hardest thing I've ever experienced. You were supposed to hold my hair while I threw up and rub my feet when they swelled and tell me I was beautiful even when I felt disgusting. I tried. You tried? You tried while you were texting her? While you were planning your next rendezvous? While you were deciding which lies to tell me? Derek stepped back. He was not expecting this version of Caroline. The soft, accommodating wife had vanished. I'm not the one who pushed us apart, Caroline continued. I'm not the one who chose someone else. You did that. You made that choice. Over and over again. For 8 months. I know. I know. Then stop blaming my pregnancy for your failures as a husband. Derek reached for her arm. She jerked away. Don't touch me. Caroline, please. I want you to leave. Let's just talk about this. Calmly, rationally. There's nothing rational about what you did, and I'm done being calm about it. Derek's expression shifted. The desperation gave way to something harder. You know what? Maybe I wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere if you'd been more available, more present, more like the woman I married instead of some exhausted stranger I barely recognize. Caroline felt like she had been punched. Get out. I'm trying to save our marriage here. By blaming me for your affair, get out of my parents' house. Derek moved toward the door, but on his way, he stumbled against the side table. Her mother's vase, the blue and white porcelain she had been saving for the baby's nursery, crashed to the floor. It shattered into 100 pieces. Caroline stared at the fragments, the last physical connection to her mother, gone in an instant. I'm sorry, Derek said quickly. That was an accident. I didn't mean... Leave now. He went. The door closed behind him. His car started, drove away. Caroline sank to her knees amid the broken porcelain. One piece at a time, she gathered the shards, wrapped each one carefully in tissue paper, placed them in a box she found in the closet. Maybe someday she could glue them back together, put the vase back the way it was, but probably not. Some things, once broken, stayed broken forever. She sat on the floor until dawn, surrounded by tissue paper and fragments, processing the wreckage of everything she had built. At 6 a.m, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. Caroline. Harold's voice, quiet and urgent. I need to speak with you privately. What I've found changes everything. They met at a cafe on the other side of town. Somewhere neither of them would be recognized. Somewhere private. Harold was already seated when she arrived. A manila folder sat on the table between their coffee cups. Thank you for coming, he said. Your message made it sound urgent. It is. He slid the folder toward her. I spent 40 years on the bench learning to read people. That woman is not who she claims to be. Caroline opened the folder. The first page was a marriage certificate. Vanessa Cole and Marcus Wright, dated 6 years ago. She's married? Caroline asked. Was. Divorced after 18 months. Walkaway settlement of $200,000. She flipped to the next page. Another marriage certificate. Vanessa Cole and Jonathan Pierce. 4 years ago. Let me guess. Also divorced. With a settlement of $350,000. The pattern was undeniable. Derek is her third target, Harold said. She researches wealthy families, identifies vulnerable men, positions herself to capture them and extract maximum value. How do you know this? I hired a private investigator, former FBI, very thorough. Caroline kept reading. Each page revealed another layer of Vanessa's deception. She had met Derek at a conference specifically targeting executives, had researched the Mitchell family's assets before pursuing him, had manufactured her credentials to get a job at his firm. There's more, Harold said. Her apartment, the one Derek's been paying for, it's full of baby items. Caroline looked up sharply. She's been planning to get pregnant herself, lock Derek into a permanent connection, child support plus a claim on family assets. The baby kicked, hard, as if protesting. I'm not crazy, Caroline whispered. No, you're not. This was orchestrated from the beginning, every moment of it. Caroline closed the folder, pressed her hands against her eyes. Why are you helping me? She asked. Because justice matters. I didn't spend 40 years on the bench to watch predators destroy innocent lives unchallenged. But Derek is your son. Vanessa is his choice. Derek is my son. And I love him. But love doesn't mean excusing his failures or protecting him from consequences. Harold leaned forward. You're the strongest person who's ever been part of this family. And you're carrying my grandchild. That child deserves a mother who knows her worth. Carolyn felt something shift inside her, a tiny crack in the wall of despair she had built around herself. What do we do? She asked. Vanessa has been invited to the Mitchell Foundation's annual charity gala next week. Patricia arranged it. Of course she did. 300 guests, every major donor and business connection we have. It's the perfect stage. For what? Harold's expression was calm, deliberate, the face of a man who had delivered thousands of verdicts. For justice. Over the next few days, Harold shared his plan. Vanessa's mother, a woman named Nina Cole, had been located in Arizona. She was tired, guilt-ridden, ready to tell the truth about her daughter's pattern of destruction. Nina reached out to one of Vanessa's previous victims, Harold explained. She's been trying to warn people for years, but Vanessa is skilled at legal intimidation. Most victims just want to move on. But not this time? Not this time. Nina is willing to speak publicly. She just needed someone to give her the opportunity. The gala was in 6 days. Caroline spent them preparing. She met with her own attorney, not Megan, who she wanted to keep as a friend rather than a lawyer. The attorney was impressed by her documentation. Preliminary paperwork was drawn up. She opened her own bank account. The first time in 6 years she had finances Derek could not monitor. She reached out to Garrett, Derek's overlooked older brother. He had been silent through all of this, but Caroline suspected he knew more than he had revealed. She was right. Derek has always been the favorite, Garrett said over coffee. Mom made excuses for him his whole life. Bad grades were the teacher's fault. Failed relationships were the woman's fault. Nothing was ever his responsibility. That must have been hard for you. I stopped caring a long time ago. Garrett paused. Actually, that's not true. I still care. I just learned to hide it. Did you know about Vanessa? I suspected. The way she looked at him, the way he looked away. I've seen it before. And you didn't say anything? Who would have believed me? The forgotten brother making accusations against the golden son? Caroline understood. Being dismissed, being gaslit, being made to feel crazy for seeing what was right in front of you. You're the first wife I actually liked, Garrett continued. The first one who made Derek better instead of worse. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. It might not have made a difference. Maybe not. But I should have tried. The night before the gala, Caroline stood in front of the bathroom mirror. She had not really looked at herself in weeks, had been avoiding her own reflection like it might reveal something she was not ready to face. Now she forced herself to see. Dark circles under her eyes, drawn cheeks. The exhaustion of grief etched into every line, but something else, too. Her eyes had changed. The soft warmth was gone. In its place was something harder, sharper, steel. "Hello, Caroline," she said to her reflection. "I remember you." Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I know about your little meetings with Harold. Do you really think you can win? Derek loves me. He's just too weak to admit it. Vanessa." Caroline read the message twice, then blocked the number. She did not need to respond. Tomorrow would be her answer. The night before the gala, Caroline could not sleep. She lay in her childhood bed, staring at those glow-in-the-dark stars that had outlasted everything else. The baby was restless too, kicking and turning, like she sensed her mother's anxiety. At 3 in the morning, Caroline gave up on sleep entirely. She wandered through the empty house, past the kitchen where her mother used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings, past the living room where her father fell asleep watching baseball every night, past the photos on the walls that documented a lifetime of happiness now ended. The nursery would have been in the guest room. Caroline had planned it all out during those hopeful months of pregnancy. Yellow walls, a crib beneath the window, a rocking chair in the corner where she could nurse at dawn. Now the guest room was just a guest room, empty and impersonal. She sank into the old armchair by the window, wrapped her arms around her belly. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered. The baby kicked. "I know you believe in me, but I'm not sure I believe in myself." The darkness outside was absolute. No moon, no stars visible through the clouds, just endless black pressing against the glass. "Your father isn't a bad person. He's just a weak one. And I don't know if that's better or worse." Another kick. Stronger this time. "I wanted so much for you. A complete family. 2 parents who loved each other. Sunday dinners at Grandma's house. All the things I had growing up." Her voice cracked. "Instead, you're going to have this. A broken home before you even arrive. A mother who can't stop crying. A father who chose someone else." The tears came then, quiet and unstoppable. She cried for the marriage that was ending, for the life she had imagined, for the version of Derek she had believed in so completely. She cried for her parents, who were not here to hold her and tell her everything would be okay. She cried for her daughter, who deserved better than this fractured beginning. And finally, somewhere near dawn, she cried for herself, for the years spent shrinking to fit someone else's expectations, for the dreams she had set aside to support his career, for the version of Caroline who had disappeared piece by piece until there was almost nothing left. Starting over feels impossible, she thought, but staying feels worse. The words settled into her bones, true and terrifying. She could not go back to who she was before. That woman no longer existed. So she had to become someone new. The sun rose slowly. Pink light crept across the floor. The baby settled into stillness, finally sleeping. Caroline sat in the armchair until the room was fully bright. Then she stood up, washed her face, made herself coffee she did not drink. Today was the gala. Today was justice. Today was the first day of whatever came next. She put on her mother's diamond earrings, the ones she saved for special occasions. "Wish me luck," she said to the empty house. Then she walked out the door. The charity gala was held at the Mitchell family estate. 300 guests, crystal chandeliers, a string quartet playing softly in the corner. Caroline arrived alone. She had chosen her dress carefully, black silk that elegantly accommodated her pregnancy. not trying to hide, not apologizing, just existing in her own body without shame. The reaction was immediate. Whispered conversations, sideways glances. Everyone knew something was happening with the Mitchell family. No one knew exactly what. Caroline. Garrett appeared at her elbow. You look incredible. I don't feel incredible. You look it anyway. That's what counts. He guided her through the crowd, past the curious stares and the fake smiles, toward the corner where Harold was waiting. Everything is in place, Harold said quietly. Nina arrived this afternoon. She's ready. And Vanessa? She's here, on Derek's arm. Caroline looked across the room. There they were. Derek in a tuxedo, looking uncomfortable. Vanessa in white. A wedding dress, in everything but name. The symbolism was not subtle. Does Derek know what's coming? Caroline asked. No, he thinks this is a normal gala. He thinks he's getting away with everything. Patricia was nearby, introducing Vanessa to donors with the pride of a mother-in-law who had already picked out bridesmaids' dresses. Caroline felt a flash of fury, then, surprisingly, pity. Patricia had no idea what her son had done, no idea that her enthusiastic support was about to become public humiliation. Are you sure about this? Garrett asked. There's no taking it back once it starts. I'm sure. At 8 o'clock, the program began. Harold took the stage for his traditional speech. The Mitchell Foundation has always stood for integrity, honesty, and justice, he said. His voice carried across the ballroom. Tonight I want to talk about what happens when those values are tested. Derek shifted uncomfortably at his table. Vanessa's smile flickered. We face moments in life when doing the right thing is hard, when speaking truth means risking relationships, when standing up means standing alone. Patricia was frowning now. Something in Harold's tone had alerted her. I've spent 40 years as a judge. I've seen the best and worst of human nature. I've learned that predators come in many forms, and that the most dangerous ones wear masks of respectability. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Tonight, I want to introduce someone very brave, someone who has struggled for years to speak her truth, someone whose story I believe you all need to hear. He extended his hand toward the side door. Nina Cole stepped into the room. She was smaller than Caroline expected, gray-haired and fragile-looking, but her eyes were determined. Vanessa went white. Mom? She said, loud enough to carry. What are you doing here? Nina walked to the stage. Harold handed her the microphone. My name is Nina Cole, she said. Her voice trembled but did not break. I'm here to talk about my daughter. The ballroom went silent. Vanessa has a pattern. I've watched her destroy 3 families now. I stayed silent because she's my child, because I hoped she would change, because admitting the truth meant admitting my own failures as a mother. Vanessa was moving toward the exit. Derek grabbed her arm. What is she talking about? He demanded. Let me go. What is your mother talking about? Nina continued. My daughter researches wealthy families. She identifies vulnerable men, often those facing life changes, new jobs, new babies, new pressures. She positions herself as the solution to their anxieties. Then she extracts whatever she can before moving on. She pulled papers from her pocket. Read aloud. Marcus Wright, 18 months of marriage, settlement of $200,000. Jonathan Pierce, 14 months, $350,000. The crowd erupted. Derek Mitchell was next, Nina said. She moved to this city specifically to target him. She researched his family's assets. She manufactured credentials to get a job at his firm. She planned everything. Derek dropped Vanessa's arm like it was on fire. Is this true? He asked. Vanessa's mask had fallen completely. Beneath it was something cold, calculating. You were an easy mark, she said. They all were. Successful men are so predictable. A little attention, a little flattery, and they forget everything else. Caroline watched from across the room. The vindication should have felt sweet. Instead, it felt hollow. Derek was not redeemed by this revelation. He was just exposed as pathetic instead of malicious. Somehow that was worse. Security appeared at Vanessa's side. Not for arrest, Harold was not cruel, but the message was clear. Time to leave. Vanessa walked toward the exit with her head held high. Even now, even exposed, she refused to show defeat. At the door, she turned back. I would have won, she said to Caroline. If you'd been just a little weaker, a little more compliant, I would have had everything. But I'm not weak, Caroline replied. And you have nothing. Vanessa left. The room exhaled. Derek stood alone in the middle of the crowd. His mother was staring at him with dawning horror. His father had stepped down from the stage. His brother was shaking his head in disgust. He walked toward Caroline. I didn't know, he said. His voice was raw. I swear I didn't know she was using me. Caroline looked at him. Really looked. The man she had loved for 7 years. The father of her daughter. The coward who had failed her in every way that mattered. That's the saddest part, Derek. I believe you. The aftermath of the gala rippled through the Mitchell family for weeks. Derek moved out of their house and into a hotel. He called Caroline every day, but she let the calls go to voicemail. There was nothing left to say. Patricia disappeared from public life. The humiliation of having championed her son's mistress was more than she could bear. Harold mentioned that she was seeing a therapist for the first time in her life. Vanessa left town entirely. The exposure made her pattern too well known for her to continue operating in the area. Her mother, Nina, returned to Arizona with the first peace she had felt in years. And Caroline? Caroline breathed. For the first time in months, she could breathe without the weight of secrets and suspicions crushing her chest. The divorce proceedings moved forward smoothly. Derek signed everything without contest. His lawyer advised him to be cooperative, given the circumstances. Maintaining any claim of victimhood would be impossible after the gala. Caroline got the house, got full custody with supervised visitation rights, got enough of the assets to start over without fear. But the biggest victory was not financial. It was walking through the grocery store without looking over her shoulder. It was sleeping through the night without dreaming of confrontations. It was touching her belly and feeling only joy instead of grief. One afternoon, Patricia appeared at Caroline's door. Caroline almost did not let her in, but something in her mother-in-law's face, exhaustion, genuine remorse, made her step aside. I owe you an apology, Patricia said, a real one, not the polite deflections I've been making for years. That's a start. I was so desperate for Derek to be happy that I didn't see what it was costing, or who it was costing. You chose to believe him over me, every time. I know, and I'm ashamed of that. They sat in the living room, the same room where the baby shower had been held, where Vanessa had walked in uninvited, where everything had started to unravel. I used to think being a good mother meant protecting my children from consequences, Patricia continued. I made excuses for Derek his whole life, smoothed over his mistakes, blamed everyone else when things went wrong. And now? Now I see that I wasn't protecting him, I was enabling him. I was teaching him that his choices didn't have costs. Caroline nodded slowly. He's in therapy, Patricia said. Real therapy. Working on understanding why he did what he did. Good for him. I'm not asking you to take him back. I know that's not possible. I just wanted you to know that something good might come from all this destruction. Something good already has, Caroline said. She touched her belly. This baby is going to have a mother who knows her worth. That's something good. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. May I... She hesitated. May I still be part of her life? I know I don't deserve it, but she's my grandchild. Caroline considered the question. The old Caroline would have said yes immediately, would have smoothed over the conflict, would have pretended everything was fine, but the old Caroline was gone. You can be part of her life, she said finally, but on my terms. No more pretending, no more excuses. If you're in honestly. I can do that. We'll see. Patricia left with promises to do better. Whether she would keep them remained to be seen. But Caroline had learned something important over the past months. She could not control other people's choices. She could only control her own response. And her response was going to be strength. Harold came by the next day. He brought news. Vanessa tried to go after another family in Phoenix, but the word is out now. Her pattern is documented. No one will touch her. So she's done? As a professional predator? Yes. She'll have to find another way to survive. Caroline felt something settle in her chest. Not quite satisfaction, more like completion. Thank you, she said, for everything. I should be thanking you. You gave me a reason to use my skills for something meaningful again. Harold paused. Retirement was boring anyway. They laughed. The first real laugh Caroline had experienced in weeks. I have something for you, Harold said. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a deed. The lake cabin, he explained. It belonged to my parents. I've been trying to decide what to do with it for years. Now I know. Harold, I can't accept this. It's not for you. It's for Margaret. Caroline looked up sharply. How did you know the name? Lucky guess? It's a family name on your side, isn't it? My mother. Then it's perfect. Every girl should have a place that belongs to her. A place to start fresh. Caroline held the deed against her chest. I don't know what to say. Say, you'll make good memories there. Say, you'll teach my granddaughter to fish. Say, you'll be happy. I'll try. That's all any of us can do. 6 months later. The lake cabin had been transformed. Fresh paint, new curtains, a nursery overlooking the water. And in the middle of it all, a tiny girl named Margaret Mitchell slept peacefully in her mother's arms. Caroline stood at the window, watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of gold and rose. Her daughter's warmth pressed against her chest, her heartbeat steady and calm. This was not the life she had imagined, not the future she had planned. It was better. The divorce had been finalized 2 months ago. Derek visited Margaret twice a week, supervised by Garrett. It was not forgiveness, it was practicality. Every child deserved to know their father, even a flawed one. Derek had changed in his way. The therapy was helping him understand patterns he had never examined before. He would never be the man Carolyn had believed he was, but he might become a decent father someday. Patricia came by every Saturday to help with the baby. She was learning to knit, badly, and had produced 3 lumpy blankets that Caroline kept anyway. Progress was slow, but it was still progress. Megan visited every weekend. They sat on the dock and talked for hours while Margaret napped in the shade. Their friendship had survived everything. Deepened, even. Garrett brought groceries every Tuesday. He had become the brother Caroline never had. Steady and reliable, and always there when she needed him. And Harold called every evening, just to hear Margaret coo through the phone, just to make sure they were okay. One evening, Caroline sat on the dock watching the light fade. Margaret was asleep in the carrier against her chest. Her warmth was the most real thing in the world. The past year played through Caroline's memory like a film. The champagne glass shattering, the credit card statements, the family dinner where everything almost fell apart, the gala where truth finally emerged. And through all of it, the constant presence of the life growing inside her. the kicks that reminded her what she was fighting for, the daughter who had given her strength without even knowing it. I thought losing him meant losing everything, Caroline said softly. Margaret stirred, but did not wake. But the only thing I lost was the version of myself who needed him to feel whole. The words were true in a way she had not expected. The pain had not disappeared. The grief had not vanished completely. But beneath it all was something stronger. She had survived. She had rebuilt. She had become someone new. The doorbell rang. Caroline walked back to the cabin, Margaret still sleeping against her chest. She opened the door expecting Megan or Harold or the mail carrier. A woman stood on the porch, tears streaming down her face, clutching a newspaper article about the Mitchell family gala. "I'm so sorry to bother you," the woman said. "I saw the article about what happened. I'm going through something similar, and I didn't know who else to talk to." Caroline studied her. The desperation in her eyes, the trembling hands, the hollow look of someone whose world had just collapsed. She knew that feeling intimately. "Come in," Caroline said. "I'll put on coffee." The woman hesitated. "Are you sure? I'm a complete stranger. So was I once. Someone helped me when I needed it most. Now it's my turn." The woman stepped inside, looked around at the cozy cabin with its nursery and its lake views and its evidence of starting over. "How did you do it?" she asked. "How did you survive?" Caroline thought about the question, about all the moments that had led to this one. "One day at a time," she said. "One decision at a time. One breath at a time. It feels impossible." It does. Until it doesn't. She guided the woman to the kitchen, started the coffee maker, settled Margaret into her bassinet. "Tell me everything," Caroline said. "From the beginning." And the woman did. Her story was different in the details, but familiar in the bones. Betrayal, disbelief, the slow realization that the life you built was founded on lies. Caroline listened, asked questions, offered no judgments and no easy answers, because there were no easy answers. Only the hard truth that surviving was a choice you made every single day. When the woman finally left, hours later, she looked different. Not healed, that would take much longer, but lighter, less alone. "Thank you," she said at the door. "I don't know how to repay you." "When you're ready," Caroline replied. "Help someone else. That's how you repay me." The woman nodded, got in her car, drove away. Caroline stood on the porch watching the taillights disappear. The sun had set completely. Stars were emerging overhead, real stars this time, not plastic constellations on a childhood ceiling. Bright and constant and infinite. Margaret made a small sound from inside, the cry of a baby about to demand attention. Caroline smiled. "Coming, sweetheart." She walked back into the cabin, picked up her daughter, held her close. "It's just us now," she whispered. "And we're going to be okay." Margaret looked up at her with wide, trusting eyes. "More than okay. We're going to be amazing." And somewhere, in a nursery overlooking the water, a baby dreamed of nothing but warmth and safety and the steady heartbeat of a mother who had learned to save herself. If this story touched your heart, if you saw yourself in Caroline's journey, or if you know someone who needs to hear this message today, please share it with them. Your likes, your comments, your subscriptions, they help stories like this reach the women who need them most. The ones sitting alone at 3 a.m., wondering if they're imagining things. The ones who need to know they're not alone. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications. Because every week, we bring you stories of strength, survival, and the quiet power of women who refuse to break. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And remember, you are stronger than you know. Closing statement: this content has been carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories and valuable life lessons to our audience. Every narrative is crafted with intention to entertain, to inspire, and to remind you that even in your darkest moments, a new beginning is always possible. Thank you for trusting us with your time.